but I just want to really talk about how you got into music in the first place. Like, you grew up in Mallorca. Did you have any musical background there in your family or anything?
Not really, but my parents both loved listening to music.
Yeah.
My dad had like a very strange eclectic taste in music where he'd play some sort of like Finnish children's song, and then he loved music from Kenya, and he loved a strange modern hip hop song, and he'd walk around with, particularly in his later life, he'd walk around with his iPad just like playing songs, saying, have you heard this, have you heard that? And it was a very like sweet ignorance in how much he loved music, but he didn't play, or he never really had much of like an interest in learning more about how to perform or play music, but he just knew that it made him feel good. And he saw no distinction between music from this part of the world and music from that part of the world, and he was very kind of like, check out this, check out that.
Yeah.
And then my mum always just, she also was not musical in the sense of performing, but she always demonstrated to me like how music can make you feel, and she would play like a lot of music in the car that was just like really uplifting and beautiful. And she would play like well, we used to listen to a lot of music together in the car, and particularly on the school run, because when I grew up in Spain it was like an hour, 45 minutes to an hour either way to school driving. So we would either listen with like one earbud of the iPod while we were driving, or I had CDs and stuff. But she would love listening to like whatever kind of rock bands and hip hop and pop punk I was into. But she listened to a lot of great kind of like uplifting stuff like Chaka Khan, and she loved Whitney Houston and all that kind of stuff. So she'd play like a lot of really good like big music. But yeah, neither of them were ever super performing in that sense, but they always encouraged when I was like, oh, I want to play drums, or I want to play bass or guitar. They were always very encouraging of that.
They never pushed you away from pursuing music?
And they also never pushed me to it. You know, I know a lot of people who were like, oh man, I'm just getting back into piano because when I was a kid I had to go and take these lessons. And my parents were never like, you know, even after I'd got a bass guitar, they were never like, you better be playing that all the time. It was just a thing that they were excited to see me want to do. And yeah, it meant that I think having that kind of, well, yeah, if you want a flute, let's get a flute. If you want a saxophone, let's get a saxophone. It was like, it led to this very kind of similar to my dad's approach to listening to music. It was like, oh, well, you can play anything. You can just play around. You don't need to practice and get to grade 8 on anything. It's just play, have fun. You know. What do you want? Oh, you want a xylophone? Which is cool.
Wait, how do you feel about that parenting style versus, you know, some parents are very like, you need to learn this, you need to be very good, you need to dedicate your time to it, but rather than that, just letting the child do what they want, see what they're interested in, and flexibility. And
I would definitely lean more towards that as a projected future parenting style. I do think that there's like a certain level of like, I'm not going to like listen to the child's whim on the fact that they want to go and get like a face tattoo at 14 or 15 or something. You know, I think there's limits. There's like there's a sort of greyish area whereupon which, and then there's a sort of black and white section that probably, you know, at a certain point you need to exercise some sort of parental control based off of the fact that you've been around a little bit longer in this world. But in terms of like what we think they should do to grow, oh, you need to do this, or you need to be good at maths or whatever, that kind of shit I think is detrimental to a child growing in its own natural environment. And if I often thought as well that, you know, there's two sides to every person. There's the side of them that wants to analyze and categorize and theorize, and there's the side of them that wants to paint and dance and sing and all that jazz. And they are like sort of fundamentally at odds with each other, so we're told by society. You know, people either are mathematical or they're musical, you know. But I think one of the main reasons why that is because as a kid you do well on a maths test at being 6 years old, and so your parents go, oh, he's into maths. So they push you in the direction of the thing that you show like an early proclivity to, and then that means that what's important that could also be grown sort of dwindles as, you know, you don't get to play the piano because you're off to math camp. Similarly, there's like kids out there who maybe didn't do too well on a maths exam, and so they're pushed into fine arts, and they love painting, and they show a really great like natural skill for it because of the fact that's what their parents send them to do, and it's what they tell them they're good at, and they're told the story. But then they get to later life and they, you know, want to be a painter or an artist or a musician like me, and you're like, fuck, you actually do need to know how to pay your taxes, and you need to have a certain balance in your, you know, right and left side of your brain. So it would probably be in the interest of a child early on not to push them in either direction, but to encourage both, both sides of their development.
Like if you see an interest that they are showing, encourage it, but don't push it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very true. And if they feel like they're not interested in it anymore, I don't think necessarily it's a good idea to get into the habit of spending thousands of dollars every couple of weeks to like buy the latest whim. Oh, I want to be a film designer or whatever. Get them a brand new laptop. But at the same time, if they don't want to do it, let them fuck off. You know, let them give up, and they may come back to it of their own accord. But learning a small amount of one thing and throwing it away, I found, not throwing it away, but moving on because it no longer serves.
Pivoting.
That comes with you. It's not as if the things that you learn from a cooking course can't be then fed into music, or the books that you read on history. They help you. You're learning you're learning the art of learning, and you're practicing the art of practicing. And so that's just important, whatever it is you're doing. So onwards, kids.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, man. I have been thinking more about how I wanted to raise my kids, and that I think is just a good way to go about it.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man. So I want to know more about like how you got started in making music, though. You said you played the drums?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
My sort of earliest musical memory was that I really wanted a drum kit when I was about tall enough that you could kick me across the room.
Yeah.
And I think I had a plastic and paper skinned drum kit when I was like 3 or something.
Yeah.
Like a kid's toy. And there's a couple of pictures of me playing it and stuff, and I looked so happy. But I didn't actually get a proper drum kit until maybe I was 14, 15. We always lived in places where either we couldn't have one yet or whatever. I finally got it when we lived in the countryside.
Yeah.
And there was just no neighbours for miles, and I had my drum kit in the laundry room, which was this little separate outhouse, and I would go and just beat the shit out of it and write my favourite band names on the drum skins. I'd put Simple Plan and System of a Down and all that good stuff. But making music, like playing music, i.e. just playing guitar and playing bass and stuff, that started I think a lot earlier, probably when I was like 10 or 11. But I just used to play chords, or I would play da 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 da, and that's all I'd really do. But I used to like doing it, but there was never really, I wasn't great necessarily in those days at feeling what I was doing, other than sort of just doing stuff. And some of my other friends at the time, like I remember just thinking like, fuck, how do they do that? Like one of my good friends, Matt, music producer Cassie, if you know him, Kaasi. He's a fantastic producer, but he, in those early days, like he would just play shit on the guitar that he hadn't been taught how to do. There was this thing where it's like, how can you do a thing that you don't know how to do yet? And that's one of the things I'm most interested in now, is like that form of improvising, that form of like being on your edge to the point where you can surprise yourself. Yes. He would do that all the time, and I would just go dum dum dum. So I used to like play instruments for my early teens into my late teens, but it wasn't until I started recording songs that I was like, oh, this is fun. And in the early days of recording, I used to use Audacity, which you just can't really do anything on.
No.
But I'd record a guitar take. I'd just literally plug my guitar. I had a jack from the guitar that became like a headphone jack, and I'd plug it into my mum's old work computer when there was microphone input and speaker input, like on a laptop. And I used to just like record these silly little riffs and stuff, and I had no metronome, so it would be completely out of time, but felt really good. And then I used to go through a phase, once I got a microphone, of my girlfriend at the time. She loved all of these songs, and we'd listened to them on our iPods, and I did covers of them, and I made this sort of like covers album, EP thing, of all of the songs that we loved listening to together. And so that was fun, playing with acoustic guitar and doing chords and trying to come up with a melody and then sing it and stuff. But it wasn't really until shortly before, I suppose you guys would call it like high school, like year 12 and 13, like just before you go to university or college or whatever, I just had enough of the idea of wasting my time at school and doing like homework. And so in those days I really liked things that weren't homework. And one of those, it turned out to be, was using Reason.
Oh, that was your first DAW?
Yeah, Reason was my first DAW, with the intention of sounding just like Deadmau5.
Oh,
that was my dream, was to sound and be Deadmau5. And Deadmau5 particularly in an era just before he did the whole kind of like electro dubstep kind of sound. It was when it was this like really tasteful progressive house, like Faxing Berlin and that track with Cascade. I forget what it's called, but I fucking loved that.
Yeah.
And so I used to just make these like, it would be like 16th note gated pluck sounds, like doo, 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 like chords that would change, and I loved making music like that. And then that throughout then those final couple of years before going to university, I just started playing with Logic, and then eventually Ableton.
Yeah.
And I remember first seeing Ableton in those days and going like, oh yikes, that's horrible looking. What an ugly, weird way of working. And you know, years on, I do still very much love Ableton.
Yeah, there's so much you can do with Ableton.
Really, yeah.
Awesome, man. And so you started using Reason, and then you ended up learning Logic and Ableton too. How did you get to the point where you actually putting your music out there and promoting it and wanting people to hear it rather than just yourself?
I guess when I first started finishing songs and finishing like dance music songs or electronic songs, I was at boarding school, and I'd gone for year 12 and 13 just before going to university. And in my boarding house, there was a couple of other people who used to make music, like rappers, and there wasn't really producers so much, but we used to just like show each other music, and there was a number of people who liked hearing what I was making, you know, so I would finish a song and I would send it to their BlackBerry, and we would all listen to each other's songs on our BlackBerries. And you'd have like the file on your phone and you'd listen to it with no bass or whatever, but that was really fun, and it was nice making music as a sort of means to get over the fact that basically you're in a little prison at boarding school. I went there on my own accord. I decided I needed to go to a bigger country. Like I needed to leave the tiny island of Mallorca and go to the mainland of England for a boarding school situation. And I spent a lot of time just making music because it was sort of an escape. And I think it wasn't until I finished that and I then decided at the end of those 2 years at school that I didn't particularly want to go to university for something difficult, you know, and like, not difficult, but I didn't want to go and do any more of the whole kind of writing boring essays and stuff. And I was like, well, I've been making music like non-stop now for a couple of years. Why don't I go and do music production?
Yeah, they have that at university?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I went and got a degree in sound engineering and music production, which like was a perfect avenue to go and focus just on music. But in the end I ended up having a 13% attendance rating because it still wasn't making music, it was learning about talking about making music. It was about, here are all the things that you would need to do to start a career, and I'm like, no, I want to start a career. And so I made a Soundcloud account, and in the early days I don't know why or where it came from, but I felt as though it would be more efficient, it would be easier, and it would perhaps be more fun to market myself as not myself. And so instead of it being like, hi, I'm Alex Christopherson, like this is my music, I thought, well, why don't I create a sort of alter ego? And so I created this character called Cassie Fitzgerald. And he was a man from Mekke, Senegal. I was from Senegal. I just had to remember the town name, and it was Mekke, M-E-K-H-E, with accents on the E's. And so I made this SoundCloud account of being this mysterious guy from Senegal. And when I would talk to people, I would talk as if I was from Senegal. So I would try and make like grammatical errors that were specific to sounding. It was a very strange time. But yeah, I started doing that for a while, and I created this account where I uploaded a lot of the songs that I'd finished towards the end of school. And I started making more what at the time was called post-dubstep. And future garage and post-dubstep. And it wasn't dubstep, it was more kind of like Bondax, the early days of Disclosure, XXYYXX, those kind of Jamie XX in those early days. Lots of X's. There was a lot of people with X's in their names. But yeah, I started making kind of more of that music and started uploading it on SoundCloud, and eventually my buddy Cassie, Matt, I helped him start his music career and helped him finish off some songs, and he was like, I need a name, and I was like, why don't you call yourself Cassie?
That's pretty good already.
Yeah, we took the first name of who I was supposed to be, and then I stopped being this Senegalese man, and then started becoming a whole host of different girls, and I was all of my ex-girlfriends. Yeah, it was a strange time. So all of my artwork then became like my teenage girlfriends, and so as to make it so that it was very clearly not the same person, I put a black bar across their eyes, made everything black and
yeah.
white, and it was very chic, and people seemed to really like that. So I kept doing that for a number of years, and that led to some hilarious consequences of people thinking I'm a girl, and booking me in Belgium to come and DJ,
And they're like,
and I'm like, hello,
Hello.
it's me,
yeah.
male Tash.
Not that. So, in the early days of SoundCloud, how did you end up promoting your work, or did you just put it out there and it ended up doing well?
In those early days, like, actually, side note before I even get into
Okay.
that, but Prince, for example, everyone knows Prince. Everyone knows Talking Heads. You know, everyone knows a large disclosure. You know,
Yes.
in all of these different fields, everyone knows these large breakthrough acts, and oftentimes we forget the fact that they didn't just rise on their own. They rose from a scene. They rose from a melting pot or a community of people who were all not necessarily working together to become successful, but working together to create like a sort of family or like a specific message that it's like, yeah, we approve this approach to creativity or whatever. And I think those early days of SoundCloud, we all started, me and my friends, we all started in this, what I would call the golden age of SoundCloud, and the golden age of YouTube as well. And I think we're genuinely past what allowed me to get my success the success that I developed so easily early on. I don't think it's possible these days, the way that I did it. You would need to go through TikTok, you know, or whatever's next. I may not even be at the cutting edge to even tell you what's on. But I think that you can't do it the way that we did it anymore, because there's just not the same interest in community on platforms like YouTube and SoundCloud. And so in those early days, me and a whole host of friends, we lived in a town called Guildford, and we sort of made a bit of like a fame for Guildford, because we were all making this electronic music, and a lot of us went to this one university, the Academy of Contemporary Music, and then a lot of us didn't go there, but they would all come to Guildford, and so we had this like this mandem, this posse, this gang of musicians, and because we would all work together and repost each other's music and play at the same shows, and if one of us got booked, we would take the other one, and we had this like ecosystem that was thriving. And also in those early days, YouTube was just starting with their YouTube channels of like music selector channels. So people maybe uploaded music in the past, but things like Majestic Casual or The Sound You Need or Eat and Messy, those kind of things were just starting. And the people who were behind them, say like Adam Engel from Eat and Messy or Olivier from Sound You Need, these people were just kids, you know, or Nick from Majestic Casual. They weren't like super successful business owners yet running YouTube channels that are charging a decent amount of money for things. They were just kids starting a YouTube channel, just like we were kids starting making music. And so when in those early days we would make music and they were fans of ours, and they liked the songs we were uploading on SoundCloud and reposting of each other and commenting and being just silly twats, and like we had a lot of stupid humor behind it all. We created this sort of little ecosystem that then led to these YouTube channels being like, oh well, we want to use your music to grow our brand. And so we had these sort of unspoken deals where anytime we would make a new song, it would just be uploaded on these channels that were slowly but surely burgeoning to great numbers. And a lot of these YouTube channels then in those early days were like, oh well, we could throw events as well. You know, we're just starting out with events, so they do one in London, and then they would do one in Belgium, and we would play them all. And it meant that we were, you know, we were in our little ecosystem of playing all over Europe with these YouTube channels as backers, and we were growing with the YouTube channels, and the YouTube channels were growing with us. But yeah, that, and then also just, I believe all of the music I made up until about 5 or 6 years in, I just gave away for free. Like I never sold anything, and it was sort of like a stamp that I was like, I refuse to sell my music. And so everything I would put up, I would say like, you can have it for free, you just got to follow me. And that's how I have 60,000 followers on SoundCloud. It hasn't really grown much in the last 5 years, but in those early days, it was like, I've got all the figures of watching it grow, and it's like the most fantastic organic reach that
it's so exciting.
It really was. And in those days as well, you used to get, I think on SoundCloud now it tells you how many plays you've had in the last 24 hours or 7 days in the last 30 days. And the statistics used to be way better on SoundCloud. I don't know what it is with modern software and these modern websites, but their approach to making things simple and minimal and whatever, and just removing like real great analytics and depth of function for God knows what reason. I don't know, maybe so they can charge you more for like a pro version, I don't know, whatever, but they don't even do that with SoundCloud. But it used to have really great statistics. You could also just hit refresh and you'd see the number go up.
Yeah.
And so we would all just
cool.
like hang out and smoke joints in our university house, and we'd just be like, whoa! We'd like release a remix or release a song, you know, and we'd all just like fucking huddle and just be so excited by each other's growth.
Yes.
And I think that's something that in some ways I've missed in certain parts of my career as I've gotten older and as I've sort of isolated myself on a mountain, is that it's really nice to make music with people, but it's also really nice not necessarily just to make it with them, but to have community of people where you're looking out for each other and you're excited for each other's success, and you can just have that feeling of like, even if you're not growing or you don't feel like you're growing, by extension you are. You know, by extension good things are happening to us.
Yes.
And if you just get too caught up in this mentality of it's like, oh, I have to, it's a fucking lonely road in this, especially this day and age.
So you think being a part of a community in general, of other people doing the same thing, is super important?
100%.
Yeah.
Because I think also, you know, there's this feeling of jealousy is the wrong word. It's not that. It's almost like it's our primal in our gang of musicians. It was all just boys, you know. We were all just there was all just boys and men and stuff. Well, we weren't men, we were boys.
Yeah.
But there was this almost kind of like this primal need to like to work, to do stuff, and to like get going. And it meant that we none of us ever slacked, because we were all just so excited by this like need to do stuff. And I think community in many ways gives you that feeling of drive, because you're always inspired by what your friends are doing. And when they're not inspired, they can be inspired by what you're doing. And I just started my my online community, my TACHES tribe thing. And it's already really cool, because we've got over 100 people in the tribe, and I can already see how nice it is to have a sort of developing family of people of all ages. You know, we've got people who are 70 plus in there, who have been making music since computers first started. You know, and they can tell me shit about music production that I'm like, damn, you know, what you used to do with floppy disks is nuts. But to have these people who have a name and a face, and who are there, you know, they're part of it. It's not just a YouTube comment that comes and goes. It's not just a number. It's not just a streaming number. It's like people who I can engage with and offer my 10 plus years of experience to help them, and they can help me. It's like, it's this thriving feeling of there being like a family. And I think it's just so important, if you are to want to do any creative endeavor, to find other people who love doing the same thing.
Yes.
And to utilize the very natural competition gene in us, not to try and be better than them, but to try and all be better together.
Yes.
And that's super important.
Awesome. And can you tell me more about the tribe that you created, and how do people join, and just more about it in general?
So for a long time, I'd been saying I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to make tutorial videos. And it was kind of like one of those things, you know, where you almost get so well associated with the desire to want to do it that you don't do it. And it wasn't until then COVID happened that then I make most of my money from gigs, or had been making most of my money from gigs. So when there was no gigs anymore, it was like, right, okay, well, how do you make money as a musician that can't tour? And I was like, well, I've got one thing that being locked in my house can't take away from me, and that is experience. And so I was very lucky where I was stuck in COVID times, was in this beautiful countryside part of England with my girlfriend at the time. And every morning I would go out and I would drag a desk, a chair, a camera, and a tripod out to the forest, and a really, really long extension lead. And I would go and just sit in the forest, and I would talk about creativity and making music. And around the same time, I started learning this piece of software, Bitwig, and did a certification course to become one of the chosen few on the planet that were deemed fit to teach it. But I started making these videos, and I was like, oh, this is actually really fun, being able to share share this knowledge, and it meant that anything new that I learned, it wasn't this thing that it's like, cool, how do I use this? It's like, cool, how do I use this and how do I teach this? Straight away, how do I share my excitement for new concepts?
Yeah.
And in some ways, it's that community thing again. It's that feeling of it's like, oh, well, I'm pushed to grow because of the fact that I want to provide more for my community. And anyways, I had this YouTube channel running for ages, and it wasn't until just 2 or 3 months ago that I finally was like, okay, that's enough. I have to make a course now. I have to make an online community, and I signed up with a thing called Mighty Networks that's allowed me to create my own. There's nowhere that you can click off of the website.
Yeah.
You know, once you're there, it's like we've got all the content and the content, like the creativity contests and like the chat and the community page. But there's no it's not like a Facebook group where you can click to the homepage. It's once you're in Tash Tribe, you're there, and it means that you have this very I suppose what would you call it? I can't think of the word when you're immersive. It's like you're immersed in what it is that we're doing there, which is really fun. And yeah, so we've had lots of the people from the YouTube community. I'm still posting the videos on YouTube, but you can then go from the YouTube to the Tash Tribe for the free downloads of. I started being like, okay, well, every time I teach something, why don't I just give the project file away?
Yeah.
So you know, if I start making a really cool song, people should be able to continue working on it, because I'm probably not always going to finish all of the things. As well as if I make like sample packs, like I want to give them to people.
Yes.
And so people can join the tribe to get all of these fun things that I make, and also do these cool live streams and stuff. So I've been doing. I just do these random workshops. Recently, I did one on creating music with AI, which is my latest passion. Which, believe it or not, for somebody so into like the magic and the human aspect of music, like I've found real depth in AI lately. But yeah, the community's been really fun for that.
Awesome, man. Is there like a Discord or something where they can talk with each other as well?
Yeah. I've also made a Discord, but there's like a chat room. There's like a chat.
There's a chat room on the site?
Yeah. So people can be chatting, but then if you want to like post a thing, then there's like various thread pages and stuff. It was really cool because it's like its own little social media platform where I want to keep you here, and I want to steal your attention, and I want to point that attention back at your personal growth and music.
Yes.
You know, and like rather than be trying to sell you. Obviously, I want to sell you things.
Yeah.
But I want to sell you things. I want to sell you lots of things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I want those things to help you make music and feel free.
Yes.
But still buy them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. So you have been producing for 10 plus years, like we talked about, and releasing music, and you already talked about how much the industry and how you become successful has changed. We're not in the SoundCloud age anymore. But you still managed to have around like 250,000 monthly listeners on Spotify. Have you found like specific things that have helped you maintain your popularity?
I would say the number one is just putting out a lot of music. And it would help if you're happy with that music as well. And I'm not there's a caveat. Don't just put out music for the hell of it.
Yeah.
If you can respect the music you've made and you can love it and you can, I suppose, respect yourself enough to make music that you love, and to stand by it, even if it feels as though maybe it's not what it's not what the society wants or whatever.
Yes.
It's never been an interest of mine to make something that's hot. I've always wanted to make things that I like and ultimately feel like a step on my evolution, or a step along the adventuring journey of making music and stuff. And so put out a lot of music continuously all the time. And I'm not saying that is also the answer, because maybe people don't like your music, but that's no reason not to put out a lot of stuff. Like maybe you're making just like really quite difficult niche music. I doubt a lot of people are doing that, but if you're making like really aggressive ear bleeding noise, like you're making noise, just put out a lot of it. You know, eventually there will be your niche of people that will just start listening to it. I hope. But I also say that with all of the understanding that I got to there through a golden age that I don't think is possible nowadays in the same way. And so I had a lot of those fans carry over from a far more poppy beginning. A lot of the things I was doing in the early days, like I had sort of the stamp of approval of these like poppier parts of music. did official remixes for like John Newman and Naughty Boy and Rufus. I did a remix of one of those, and Zoo. And so all of those kind of things really helped sort of garner an element of credibility that I think allowed me over the last however many years, 7 years, 8 years since those days, to just sort of do whatever the fuck I wanted. But I think, it's also crucial to make sure that you're always growing. And if you, I can't say from personal experience what happens if you try and make a song that sounds like your last big hit.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't recommend that. Because, you know, even if that's a hit, if that becomes your approach to success, is trying to make what was successful, then you're not moving forward. You're focusing on algorithmics and data, and also the things that get big these days oftentimes aren't always because they're a great song, but it's because of algorithmic data trending. And if something is popular, it's likely that it feels or sounds or looks or tastes similar to something else that was popular. And so I think that sometimes you could probably be on the cutting edge and you won't be appreciated for it yet.
Yeah.
And that's cool too. So just put out a lot of music all the time.
Awesome, man. You have very similar artwork on all of your recent music. Is that artwork you created, or can you tell me more about the artwork in general?
So those the artwork was actually a Czech artist, and the early days it was an illustrator. I haven't actually worked with him in a while because I went through this sort of little phase of not making much music.
Yes.
But amazingly, I paid him first and foremost to make me a logo, and he drew the classic cowboy horse situation.
Yeah.
And I loved it so much, I was like, okay, well, I want artworks. So I had these amazing artworks, and now I've got to a point where I have enough of those artworks where I've just fed them into a neural network, and now I just generate them based off of...
No way.
Yeah, so like I have the art style,
yeah, and
I know what the background color is. For Midjourney, the background color is called Dutch White, which the hex code is EDDABE, and and now it will generate it with some nonsense text that needs to be removed and stuff. But it means that now I have a number of releases coming out the rest of this year of friends, like they're releasing songs on the label, and instead of having to having to get someone to draw them now, I just ask them, what is it that you want? What do you want as the picture?
Yeah.
And so I've just taken all of the previous artworks of Glitter Cowboy and I fed them in there so that like it's been trained on what I want.
Yeah.
And I say like a couple walking through Lisbon in the rain.
Yes.
And what's cool is obviously you do multiple generations of specific facets of it. So now it means that I have more control. Because in the past, I would get somebody else to do the drawings, and if they weren't quite right, then I'd have to either tell them I wanted changes or whatever. And like the whole spirit of Glitter Cowboy and the whole spirit, I think, of the TACHES project is that I wanted to do it all myself.
Yes, yeah.
Which isn't necessarily very good, and I wouldn't recommend that. However, I do really like having control back in being able to decide art-wise what I want for the label. And so it's really fun now having the creative endeavor of the fact that when somebody asks me that they would like a picture of a couple in the rain walking through Sintra in Portugal and they want a tree, Midjourney won't just generate that. It's probably not going to be smart to be able to do that. Also, some of the other tools, they're not going to be able to do just that. So instead, I'll then generate different parts of it. So I'll do like Sintra, and then I'll do a couple, and then I'll do a tree, and then I just like piece them together in Photoshop.
Yeah.
And it's so fun. And if you need to remove or get rid of any things that alter them, then you've got the generative fill in the new Photoshop beta where you can just say, make the tree an oak tree, and it'll just do it. So, I mean, AI is, I think,
insane.
A very exciting precipice that we're perhaps about to fall off of.
Definitely. And like you said, being able to do everything yourself.
Yeah, and it's like, it's so empowering to not have to wait for people. And to not have to find excuses for why you can't do it now. It's like, oh, well, I don't have the money to pay a graphic designer. Or, oh, I'd love to get this song mixed, but I don't know the good mixer. It's like, well, why would you need to wait anymore?
Yeah.
When ultimately, like, if you pay somebody $500 or you pay them $5,000 to do something, what matters is whether you like what they've done. And if you have the chance to sit there and offer yourself options to go, which one of these do I like the most? That means that you're developing a far, I don't know, more intimate relationship with the things that you're putting out into the world, because you're saying, I'm happy with this, I'm happy with this, I'm happy with this, as opposed to in some ways being bound by the kind of societal rule of the fact that you can't ask for too many revisions or too many edits, or God forbid, you know, oh, I can't afford to pay that person that. Well, just do it yourself then.
Yes.
And if you can't yet do it yourself, learn to. And if you don't know how to learn how to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many resources now. You can learn anything.
Yeah.
I want to learn more about Glitter Cowboy, specifically your label, and also you have put music out on other labels before as well, like Anjunadeep. How did that happen first? And then I want to hear more about how do you decide to make your own label, and what has that done for you?
So the other labels,
yes,
particularly Anjunadeep, I would say that in the early part of my career, a lot of the depression I felt about music, this was, I'd say, after those first couple of goldmine years of the YouTube and the Soundcloud days. I then left England and I moved to Barcelona. And in those days I smoked a lot of weed in my boxer shorts, getting up at 2 p.m. And I, you know, side note, I do believe that a large amount of depression it's a natural reaction to the bad choices you're making for yourself. Not necessarily, it's definitely not a chemical imbalance. But anyways, I was making terrible choices for myself, and as such, paying the price of experiencing depression.
Yes.
So these months of being, or these years of feeling very sad, I wasn't finishing anything, and instead I was just making like whips, you know, works in progress. I was making these ideas, and I had management at the time, and I put a lot on them, the fact that they needed to get me these releases on these big labels and blah 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 blah. And big labels don't want to sign a whip. No. You know, they don't want a work in progress, they want a song, and in fact they want a few of them. And so, you know, there was this sort of indignance that I felt, that it was like, how dare they not see my true genius? And I went through the, you know, this real phase of, I suppose, dealing with a bit of arrogance that I developed through having had such great success so early on, that it was like, well, I expect for the hallways to just open for my heartfelt music and stuff. And ultimately I wasn't finishing things, and at the same time, the things that I did finish, we sent them to labels, you know, and the gatekeepers of my success, the things I needed to do to grow, to be able to get on with my life. I needed a label to accept me. They would come back with notes and they would say, oh, we don't like this because of XYZ, or we think you should change this. And there was a part of me that obviously wanted to grow and find success, but there was a part of me that was like, how fucking dare you tell me what I need to do to my art? I don't want to fucking work with you then. And that that perhaps like impetuousness has led, I think, to one day my mum was like, why don't you just start your own label? Why don't you just and my mum's been a huge supporter, and she's a very business minded human, and she's always had such a great intuitive understanding of like what should be done and things. So she was like, you should start a label. And so I actually launched Glitter Cowboy on her birthday.
No way.
Yeah, so the first album, or the first 5-track EP, came out on her birthday, and in honor of this genius woman. But yeah, Glitter Cowboy really just served as the tool that would allow me to go through putting my lack of growth on things outside of myself back into my own hands. It was like, well, if you're going to keep saying that it's Virgin's fault or Defected's fault, that I'm not where I want to be, well, okay, well now it is your fault if you're not where you want to be.
Yes.
Because if you're not putting out music, it's not because somebody else is telling you that they won't. It's because you're not putting out music. And so, back to one of the things I said about one of the best ways to grow is to put out a lot of music. I've put out over 100 songs on Glitter Cowboy.
Wow.
Because I can.
Yeah.
And also I can sit down at my computer and I can finish a song, and without even getting up, without having to call anyone, I can export it as a WAV, make some fucking artwork, and I can upload it then and there to be scheduled to release in 2 weeks' time if I want. And that feeling of liberation and freedom is paramount, I think, for any kind of artist that wants to shake their fist. Like, well, shake your fist at yourself now. And so Glitter Cowboy has also been a really fun way of being able to just try out different things. So I've put out house songs. A large percentage of my catalogue is house music, but a song like Don't Walk Ahead is like a gospel song. And that was something that I just wanted to do because I love gospel. And at the time, my management said, well, you can't put that out. And I was like, well, why not? And they said, because it would be confusing. You know, your fan base won't know what to think of you. and proves them right. Like the song almost has 2 million plays, and people have specifically told me, I love that you make music that sounds like Sophia's theme and Don't Walk Ahead. It's like, thank you. Those are my fans. The people who understand, you know, that you don't have to be fucking pigeonholed into a little box.
No.
Particularly not by, usually an A&R in a suit, not even in a suit anymore. Now it's probably some sort of like man bun. Maybe we're not even there. Maybe that's even more 2012. But some person who probably had an inclination to be a musician but didn't really pursue it, and instead now works on sort of pigeonholing other people's music and trying to like neatly sell it to a consumer. You know, there's a real need for labels. There's a real need for A&R, and a lot of people have great taste. But I think the commercialization and the selling of music and treating music as a product as opposed to an expression is a problem. And you can free yourself massively when you realize the fact that the thing that you're making isn't a product. And you can still sell your expressions, but if you go in trying to make music as if it's a product, it's like, okay, well, what's the niche in the market that's needed based off of these analytical trends? I don't know. It's not fulfilling.
Yeah.
You know, oh well, Chammy is big at the moment. Maybe I
Yeah.
should make some music like that. If you want to, and it calls your heart to do so, then that's one thing. But if you're like, oh well, I want to grow my circumstances to be more successful, therefore I should do this, or God forbid the label told me to do this, I should do that. Then I don't know, you're selling yourself short.
You need authenticity.
Yeah.
You know?
And authenticity boils down to, what do you fucking love?
Yes.
What is it that sets your heart on fire? Do that.
Yeah.
And if you don't absolutely feel that way, then don't do it. Do something else.
You talked about something that I want to talk about as well, where there will be this pressure to stick to one style of music, like your brand, pretty much. And that can benefit you in that people know what to expect from you, but also then maybe you don't really grow as much and you don't really explore these other areas. And you specifically, I mean, I listen to your music from 10 years ago on Soundcloud versus now it's so different. What do you think about that? Just trying new styles, and is that something that is important to you?
I'd say so. I mean, I don't necessarily, I say I try new styles. Like, you haven't ever seen me put out a drum and bass
No.
EP, or I play around sometimes with like trying to make it and stuff, but one of the main reasons why I haven't done it is because it just doesn't excite me as much. But definitely like world music of all varieties of sort of world folk music and disco and folk music and like as in Americana folk music with acoustic guitars and finger picking and all that, and soft jazz and soft rock and yacht rock, all of these things. I fucking love all of these genres of music, and I see them in I suppose the same way that my dad does music, which is that they're all just influences, they're all just things that you like. Therefore, when I sit down to make music, there's no conscious desire to grow or to change. It's just, I think, a natural evolution over time as the things that you're ingesting and the things that you're learning more about and learning to love more, they just naturally find their way to filter through you. And I make music because I have to, not because I have to because I've got a gun to my head, but because like I wouldn't feel at home on this world if I wasn't doing that. And so I think having to make music as a constant outlet, as well as then being a human being that grows and learns and lets go of things. And you know, I went through a phase of I didn't put out that much music during that phase. It was actually during the smoking weed in my boxer shorts till 2 p.m. wake up call in Barcelona phase. But I was into a lot of very dark music, like Stefan Bodzin and Tale of Us, and like I really loved that sound. And like I guess that was 2014, 2015. I loved that. And so everything I was making at the time, I wanted to elicit this feeling of like doom and gloom and darkness. And I've now arrived at a point where I don't want to do that anymore. It's not because I think it's bad or wrong or whatever. I'm not going to be going to any afterlife parties because it just doesn't set my heart on fire. I've arrived now at a point through just living my life that I understand, for me, that it's about liberating and creating a sense of freedom and connection and unity and joy and love. And it seems as though the palette of sort of disco and funk and classic Chicago house and stuff best fits for that. But I don't know, I've also gone through phases of really loving like Romanian minimal music. And the interplay of all of these things comes through just through doing what you do, you know? And Yeah, I think also those early days of SoundCloud, I did go through a slight phase towards the end of that where I had become known for creating these rather more pop style arrangements.
Yes.
I was making like 3 minute 40 seconds, 4 minute songs that were quite neat. You know, they were neat, and I was making them for the SoundCloud YouTube days.
Yes.
And it wasn't until coming to California and going to a festival called Desert Hearts that I started being like, oh, songs can be 7 minutes.
Yes.
And when a song can be 7 minutes, it requires a completely different approach to choices, and also to subtlety and to patience and stuff. And I started having this conflict where I was like, well, I'm known for being this thing, and now I want to explore this thing. And I started like building up this idea in my head that my fans weren't letting me evolve, and that like, but I can't do that because they expect this of me. And it wasn't until Glitter Cowboy and being, you know, free of any kind of outside intervention into my creative process that I was like, oh wait, I can do whatever the fuck I want.
Yeah.
And some people will like it, some people will love it, and also some people won't like it. Some people will hate it. And that will happen all the time. Whatever it is that you do, whether you make the most beautiful piece of music that 100 people tell you like, I'll give my firstborn child to listen to it again.
Yeah.
There's a million people out there who hate what you do. And so if any reason why you're not growing or changing or exploring or experimenting is because of other people, like, know that whatever people you're imagining are holding you back, you could imagine a different group that are encouraging you. You know, whatever group that you think want you to stay like this, there's another group out there would love if you'd become a jazz musician. You know, like whatever you do, there's just this fluid, organic nature of that you'll find your way, you'll find some sort of sense of direction in there, and maybe you'll turn again, and that's fine. Eventually you'll die as well.
Yeah. It's good to remember. I want to talk to you about collabing with people. You said you live with someone that you produced with before.
Yeah, I'd say my biggest collaborator, Jackson England.
Yeah. How did you create these relationships in the first place and start to make music with these people?
Well, Jackson, his sister is a musician called Annabelle England.
Okay.
They're a fantastic musical family, and in the early days of my Los Angeles visits, my manager connected me up with Warner, who she was signed to. And Jackson used to write with Annabelle. He was a writing partner of hers, and we had a session together in Santa Monica at the Warner Studios. Actually, it was Interscope, which I believe was a subset of Warner. But anyways, we had a great first session, and then Interscope paid for us to have a session in England for a week. And so they flew those guys over there, and we rented. They rented this amazing house for us. They rented an amazing studio called the Dairy in Brixton, and I lived in Barcelona at the time. And so they paid for them and me to fly to Barcelona and have this great studio session. And fortunately, none of that music ever came out. There's a lot of good music just sat in the archives of unreleased Annabelle England stuff that I wish we could release. But that led to a real deepening of a relationship with her brother Jackson, and he's a just incredibly talented human being who I feel like I could make a song, you know, in 5 minutes with just a bunch of noises and stuff recorded. You give him like 1 or 2 words, he will write the most beautiful song easy. It's like it just comes out of him. It's like he's reading it off of some invisible teleprompter. And so it's been a really natural relationship where, you know, what sort of organic ease I have with production, he has with songwriting and singing. And it's like, let's do a harmony. And he's like, yeah, that's the one. Let's do another one. And so, you know, there's a real joy, I think, is particularly if you've spent a lot of time honing your craft at the point where you are arguably very good at the technical side of it. Like, I know all of the shortcuts, and that's I'll be boastful of the fact that I've spent years of my life not hanging out with my friends and missing probably out on a large part of weekend fun by just spending all my time fucking becoming a better music producer. And that's not necessarily even just the creative aesthetic aspect of it. It's, I mean, technical, learning how to be able to not think, how to be able to control my software in such a way as the fact that I can get out of my way. Working with people who have done that for their craft as well is one of the best things you can do for creating just real magic. Is if you're a great producer but you struggle with singing, I'm not saying that you shouldn't work with people who are just starting out, but find someone who is as good at their craft as you are yours, and you will move mountains together. And So working with Jackson has been that, where all of our greatest hits, like Heart of Gold and Walk in the Room and Addiction, all of these songs, they were easy. They're some of my favorite songs I've ever made, and they were easy. They weren't a struggle. They came out of the ether because we both just fucking love what we do and we're good at it.
Yes.
But in terms of collaboration, I would say it's very important to collaborate if you want to grow and find where you need to grow. Collaborate. Because if you're just always working on your own and you're always doing stuff on your own, you'll never come up against your limitations. And it's oftentimes also working with other people that you encounter things where you're like, oh, that's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
I want to learn to do that. There are certain people who, Lyle, a friend of mine who plays keys, he played on Heart of God. He's played on a lot of my stuff as well, actually. Just being with him, just collaborating with him, made me want to play piano more. It made me want to, like, it wasn't just made me want to, but it unlocked in me the reserve of energy required to learn to play piano more. And similarly, working with Jackson made me want to learn to write lyrics more. And while I haven't really got to a point where I do that as much, like, seeing these things, collaboration is a mirror of what it is that you love, what it is that you won't stand for, and all that kind of stuff. And also, in a very kind of just data way, if you have X amount of monthly listeners and somebody else has X amounts of monthly listeners, and you collaborate, you combine those monthly listeners. And so if you do a lot of collaborations with a lot of people, you create these networks, and it goes back to those communities again. It's like if you can collaborate with a person on their track, and then they will be on your track, or even remix swaps. Remix, instead of asking for a fee from someone, ask for a remix swap. So you remix theirs, they remix yours. That means that you introduce each other to your respective fan bases. And yeah, super fun. Also collaborating with people who can play an instrument, as opposed to, I'm not saying that most producers can't play instruments, but there's a certain depth to a playing of an instrument that comes with not knowing how to produce.
Yeah.
Like, to the point where I think producers, we have this issue, which is that you hear something and you instantly want to capture it. You want to put it down, you want to make a song with it, you want to share it with the world. People who just play and they don't produce, they don't have that drive. They play because it feels good. They're sending it out into the universe, these frequencies, and they're not there trying to, like, fucking, oh, we need to keep that. And the producers come along and they're like, that, play that again, and they go, play what again? You're like, that amazing thing that you just played. It was clearly it was the hook. It's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm just playing. So collaborating with human VSTs, you know, human music generators. I have a couple of human music generator VST friends who just go like, go, and they just play, and you go, that it, and they go, cool, I'm glad you're recording. But yeah, super cool.
Awesome, man. You talked about how there were a lot of weekends when you missed out on hanging out with friends, for example. Do you believe that there is like a balance you need to have with music production? Like, can you be all in on music and not really see your friends, or do you need to have some kind of friend time?
It's probably quite important to find some balance, I think. There's definitely been times in my life where I was giving myself the experience of depression by not getting up and leaving my computer, and clearly making music wasn't working that day. I wasn't even making music. Clearly sitting and staring at a computer screen and typing and clicking with the intention of feeling something wasn't working that day. Like, my addictive tendency to just sit in front of a computer and hope that Ableton or Bitwig will save my day. No. Those days you need to get up, you need to go for a walk in nature, or you need to go and cook a lavish meal for yourself, or hang out with some friends, or anything but make music. And I think the sort of the notification bell that comes up with when it's probably a good idea to take a break is, does it feel good to make music right now? Do you feel trapped in making music right now? Do you feel anxious about making music right now? Probably not a good time to be doing it then. So it's probably indicating that you're lacking something else. And while I do think that if you really want to become a great music producer, you need to put a large amount of time and effort into it, and probably you should perhaps not go out drinking every night with your friends, and perhaps you should divert a large portion of your attention towards doing so. There is a balance where I can see in myself, I've done myself damage by not taking a break, whether that was like a break for an hour, a day, a week, or a weekend, even a month. Sometimes you need to just like take a step back.
Yes.
And if you find yourself constantly missing out on your life, not to make music, but to feel frustrated by music, and that's indicating of the fact that probably you need to find a rebalance there.
Yeah.
But final disclaimer on that: if you find yourself like missing out on your life, as in like skipping birthday parties and that shit, to make music and to feel like a deep spiritual connection with it, being a monk, baby, like that's fine, that's good. But don't be missing out on your life to feel frustrated that you can't grow. You are going to miss out on those kind of things. Make it a conscious decision to commune with that spirit of music in a deeply growth and spiritual minded way, and then you're good.
Yeah.
Because the music is nourishing you anyway.
Yeah. Don't do it just to do it. You think you need to. And
definitely don't do it because you think that, I need to pay rent, therefore I need to be a music producer and I need to... No. If that's the case, though, I have never had to do that because somehow just making music has always funded my way and I've always believed that it could. And so I would always be able to get a gig or teach some sort of student that paid a large fee or whatever. But if you need to, get a side job. But don't get to the point where you're relying on music to the point where you're depressed by your life because music ain't paying, and then you become a person who's like, oh, the music industry sucks. And it's like, well, yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. What are you talking about? That's why you have to pave your own way. But to get to a point where you're reliant on a thing that you say sucks, like, no. Find reliance on another shitty industry.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I'm gonna check my notes real quick.
Yeah.
Some questions. Do you have your phone on you? Can I get a time check?
Let's see.
Thanks, man.
It is 9:23.
Awesome. Awesome. I just have a couple more questions, and then I'm gonna leave the last 10 minutes or so for you to plug anything. We already talked about some of it, but anything that you want to promote. And yeah. Honestly, my last question is, you have so much that you recently started, like Tash Tribe and Go to Cowboy. You have a lot of time ahead of you. What do you see for like the next 5 to 10 years of you and your music and your label and everything?
I think one of the most exciting things that I can see at some point on the horizon is creating a place. And it's not a cult, maybe a bit of a cult, but creating a place, a sort of retreat center of sorts where there's a lot of studios, a lot of great instruments set up, a lot of vintage synths and stuff, and people can come and they can experience something inside themselves, something together that will allow us to do great things musically. And my girlfriend, she's a medicine woman of sorts, and she does a lot of interesting stuff in that space.
Okay.
And so I think in the future it would be great to create a place together, definitely sort of cowboy themed.
Yes.
With a lot of land where we can be far away from the hubbub of city life, and to be able to provide a sort of creative sanctuary for people to come and to run retreats and to have interesting guests coming and talking about spirituality and liberty and creativity and unity and all the good things that end in T.
Yes.
I'd really like to do that. Similarly, I'd also really like to be eventually hosting sort of live courses with people. The courses I've put up so far on Tash Tribe have been I pre-recorded and I put it up and people go through it at their own pace. But one of the courses that I'm working on launching soon is maybe it's going to be 6 weeks. I'm not sure necessarily yet on the length of it, but it will be a group course where over the space of 6 to 8 weeks I help people unlock in themselves a freedom to improvise. And so it will be targeted specifically at people who maybe have played guitar for years, but they find themselves playing the same old chord progression every time, or they sit down at a piano and they just play chopsticks, or maybe they learnt to play piano as a youth and they can play Chopin and all that stuff, but their fingers play only things they've learned. And so I'm writing right now this course, which I'm going to be called Play with Heart. And the point of it is, instead of instead of thinking that there's techniques you have to learn, it's sort of unlearning those parts of yourself that prevent you from being able to surprise and wow yourself musically constantly. And that is improvisation. That's the expression that exists just beyond what is expected of your hands. And a lot of the time that doesn't come through thinking what you want to play. That comes through just feeling what is being played. So that's definitely something I'm excited about doing. And also I'd like to do an album. I'd like to do a proper album. One of the sort of album-based projects I'm working on right now is using only AI. So I'm generating, a lot of the things that I've done in music, I've sampled recordings from my iPhones, or I've got ambiences from the BBC archives and different places. I'm now generating samples from text to music. And that's super cool because it means that the aesthetics that I have in mind when I would describe it to somebody, so it's a jungle, tiki, 1950s lush string tribal disco house. I can use those word stamps through like natural language recognition with AI to generate sounds that sound like what I'm imagining. And that means that I'm not limited by what sample packs people have created or what things I have in my immediate vicinity to record. And I've been making some really fucking cool music where every single sound in it, I'm not generating a song and there you go, one wham bam, thank you ma'am, like that's the finished song. It's you generate a piece of music and then there's software that can split it into stems. So maybe I just want the kick out of like a generation. Maybe I just want the vocal out of another one. I'm now splitting these things and taking all of these layers and basically creating these collages of AI generated samples. But it all started from text. So it's like I'm using text to generate sounds, to split them up, and it's very exciting. I think this is what I'm most thrilled about at the moment, are the possibilities of these text to music generators. So you'll see an album soon, or at least an EP of music that has been made exclusively. I finished the first song and it's amazing. Really, really cool.
That's so exciting, man. And you're constantly growing too. Like these new tools come up and you learning how to use them, and it's doing really well, it sounds like.
It's really fun.
Awesome, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to come out
Thank you,
here.
man.
I want you to take some time to talk about everything you're working on, what you want to promote.
Oh yeah.
That's right now.
Yeah, nice. Well, I'll talk to the camera then.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose my most exciting thing, as we've mentioned a couple of times today, is the Tash Tribe community, which you can join for $9.99 a month or $99.99 for the year. And that will give you access to free project downloads, free sample packs, presets, live streams that I do. I do a live stream every week, whether that's a sort of track breakdown, feedback listening sessions, just random workshop ideas. That's probably, I'd say, the thing that I'm most keen on growing at the moment. I'm actually in the midst right now, after I go home from this interview, I'm going to continue working on my next course. The first course I did was Bitwig Grid 101, which is a sort of, grid is the modular environment, similar to Max for Live or Reactor by Native Instruments. It's the modular environment of Bitwig. So slightly more niche there. But I'm currently creating a Bitwig 101 course, which is you've never used Bitwig before, here's a course on how to use it. And I haven't probably even mentioned what Bitwig is. It's the DAW that I use, Bitwig Studio, created by some of the early coders of Ableton that left with some creative differences about how much and how quickly they wanted to innovate and change the world of music production. I truly think it's the future. If you haven't heard of it yet, you will at a certain point in the future. And it's a wild piece of software that I'm very proud to be a part of, the community of. And so, watch this space for more related content on that. But I'd say that's about it, really.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, man.
Yeah,
for having
you,
me.
man.
Yeah, this has been really fun. Yeah, good learning about you.